Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. We have JD Rothman here again talking about the neurotic parenting blog that she writes and giving us some advice about college and everything about college and everything about being a neurotic parent. I'm with you.
I know you are.
So welcome. I didn't think I was, but I am a neurotic parent.
Well, that's part of the whole deal. I think a lot of people who are relatively chill until the college process sneaks up on them um, suddenly discover that they're neurotic.
Well, I'm right there. You know, it's funny. So our children now both have attended Duke, and my son has there's a Duke class of 2021 parent Facebook page, and I think I wrote you about this in email that I thought, okay, well, you know, it's April, so I know that there's a parent orientation in August, and so around May, like not that far along, like May, I start to think, oh, well, maybe I'll look into tickets because, it seems like there's just chatter about, and I thought I better, get on it. And then all, all of the hotels are booked
Right.
already. And I thought, oh my God, who are these people? And then I thought, I better start booking for October's parent weekend.
Right.
Almost
And,
all of
and
those are,
those are booked.
yes.
Yeah.
This is beyond neurotic parenting. I mean,
Right.
I'm like a heavy duty planner,
Uh-huh.
and I am getting outclassed in this neurotic parenting group.
Yeah. Well, that's more just type A organizing. That's not even really neurotic. That's kind
Is
of
it?
people who are used to having these bulletin boards on their refrigerators or in their kitchen on the desk with a different activity for every hour. They just kind
Right.
of move over to that when they become an empty nester.
Wow. Okay.
And but for Duke, you're lucky because there are a lot more hotels and flights than there were when my kids were there.
Yeah.
So
I know there's a direct flight from Seattle, so I'm
yeah.
kind of shocked
Oh,
about
that's oh,
that.
that's
A direct
fantastic.
nonstop flight from Seattle.
Wow. Okay, that was we didn't even have one from LA when they
Yeah,
started.
so things are looking up, and Raleigh Durham itself is fantastic. But I digress. All right, so having gone through this now with one child, and sadly, I have a second child who's a junior. So I'm just
Oh no,
launched your
I'm
first
sorry.
one, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm starting all over again.
Yeah.
And I don't know how your boys. What were the spacing of your kids? Were they
Three
okay?
years,
So you had 1 year gap to just breathe.
sort of.
Okay. So what was it like with your second kid? I'm curious. What changed? What was similar? Had things changed?
Well, things were supposed to be a lot more chill because there were fewer kids applying. My older son was part of the baby boomlet, which was the boomers' millennial uh, birth high birth rate, and there were supposed to be fewer applicants my second child's year.
Wow.
But what happened was people were applying to more schools, partly because of the Common App. So when my first child applied, they called it the most difficult year in the world to get into college.
Wow.
And that was why I started the blog. When I thought, okay, great, that he happens to fall into that.
Right.
But the whole time I was thinking, well, at least my second child will be in an easier year. But it
Mm-hmm.
was actually, I think every year since then, which was '09 or '08 when my first one applied, has become more difficult. And it's because kids are applying to more schools. And also because the cost has skyrocketed. Like even since I wrote the book, this is the book that came out of the blog,
Mm-hmm.
The Neurotic Parent's Guide to College Admissions. And since I wrote the book, we're going to be updating it because right now people in some ways are more angst ridden about paying for college than they are about getting in.
Mm, yeah. It's a lot. Sixty
It's a
five
lot.
thousand dollars
Yeah.
a year, and and uh, and if your kid doesn't know exactly what they want to do, there's not a lot of patience from the parent
Right.
perspective. I mean, there is, but then you're like, wow, I'm paying a
Yeah.
lot of money and
Right.
you don't know what you want to do or you're going to go to join a frat. Like, okay.
Yeah. Well, they know they want to do that.
Well, that's my son said, I just want to tell you that I would like to join a frat. And I was, okay. And I said, okay. Because I really do feel a mix about frats because I think that
Yeah.
it does teach you a lot about the social order of what's happening in the world around you anyways, whether it's spoken
Right.
or unspoken. If you go to a frat, it's spoken and you understand it. And then you go to a corporate America, you do a law firm, you go
Mhm.
wherever, and it's the same dynamics. And you're like, okay. So it's helpful from that perspective. You're learning social skills.
Well, I was a hippie, and frats would have been the uncoolest thing for me,
Yeah.
or sororities. But I think now they do play a role, and I've actually seen the benefits, especially since they graduated. The Brothers for Life thing is not a myth, and I do think that they take the community service part aspect of it seriously, and the bad stuff you hear about because it is bad stuff, but there's a lot more good stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
than bad stuff.
Well, a friend of mine who went to Duke in '85, he said, I said, so would you still join a frat? He's like, absolutely. The whole thing
Yeah,
about Brothers for Life, it really is true. Some of my dearest friends in my life are people that I met in the fraternity. Like, I think when you live and connect and strife and joy, you end up being very, very close to those people. It's like going through boot camp, it's a
right,
similar kind of
right.
thing. So I get it. All right. So the second kid around for you was actually harder.
Well, in our case, it wasn't harder, but it was unexpectedly, it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be compared to
Right.
the first.
Right.
But my second son, full disclosure, ended up going to Duke also.
Right.
So that part was easier because we kind of knew the drill. He was concerned about where he was going to apply early, and he didn't decide until days before that application was due. He was thinking about Northwestern because he had done a summer program there, and he was thinking about Penn, and he thought he might want to go to Berkeley, which that wasn't early admission, but that would have been a whole different thing. So he was really all over the place. But then he kind of, and he's academically was interested in a very different kind of
Mm-hmm.
major than my older son. He's more of a humanities kid. My older son was a comp sci major,
Mm.
computer science. But I think he finally said, like, oh, my brother's having so much fun at Duke, and I feel so comfortable there. And he knew that he'd have a better chance to get in early. I mean, get in at all if he applied early.
Yeah.
So he did. And my older son had also applied early. So really, I was the neurotic parent, but I didn't have neurotic kids because they both got in early and they got to enjoy their
Yeah.
senior years.
Yeah. So, how much, and neither of you, your husband and neither of you went to Duke, right?
Now, we
Okay.
did.
So for schools, there's always this question like legacy. How much does it matter? Do you have a sense of that now? Like, do you think it helped your second son? How much does it matter that you have other family members or aunts or uncles or you yourself went to the school?
It depends on the school. My husband went to UCLA, which is very coveted, and no one there could care less. Um, if you're a legacy for UCLA or Berkeley or somewhere like that, it doesn't matter at all.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a legacy for Stanford, anecdotally from what I've heard, they might give your application a little bit more weight, or they might read it a third time or instead of just two times, but it doesn't really help that much. But a school like Duke will say that yes, it does help if you have a sibling there or if your parents went there, but only if you apply early, which then turns into a whole chess game because it's kind of, well, should I wait and see where I might get in regular? Or I'm sorry, my computer, how do I turn that off? Is beeping. Do you hear that?
Nope, I don't hear
No?
it.
Oh,
Nope.
okay, good. See, I'm neurotic
I do.
about
I hear I hear your headphone. I hear your,
this.
yeah,
Oh,
moving around on a piece of
oh,
paper.
oh,
Aside from
really?
that, yes, but it's
It's not.
okay.
It's not near a piece of paper.
Oh, I hear something swinging around. I don't know what it is. Anyways, it stopped. Whatever it is stopped.
Okay.
Okay, so
Um,
for
so 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 that in that case, I would say how does legacy matter? It really varies from school to school, and
mhm,
it's up to the parent or the applicant to look into whether it helps.
right,
And a school like Duke will say, yes, it helps if you apply early.
right, right. So you almost have to ask the admissions office, does it actually make a difference? And if so, how?
Or you can find it, often you can find it online. And many
Really?
admissions,
Wow.
yes, and many admissions departments have fantastic blogs. I mean, the one that I recommend the most is Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'll find not great information, not just about Vanderbilt, but about applying in general.
Wow.
And um, and there are a lot of I've worked a little bit on the Kenyon College admissions blog. That's a small liberal arts school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would, if there's a school that interests your applicant, definitely check and see if there's a blog, because you then will find out answers to questions about what they're looking for in the essays and
Wow. Okay.
like.
So this is like the university admissions office has a blog.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
not every school, but many schools. Yes, and
Wow.
it'll be the actual admissions officers
Wow.
that the people that are on the admissions committee that are blogging.
Wow. Wow. So that's super helpful, especially for
Super.
Vanderbilt, which is a great school. Well, that's
Yeah,
great. Okay.
yeah.
So, so legacy matters depends. It kind of depends. We went to Berkeley, and I said, do you do demonstrated interest? Which means, for people who aren't familiar, it means that you have proof that you were going and showing your dedication and loyalty. You've seen the school, you've gone to their visits to Seattle or wherever you live, and they said no.
Right.
They just thought it was funny. They're like,
They could care less.
they
Yeah.
could care less. So I can also see, because I went to Berkeley for business school, and they could care less. Because I called up our admissions officer. I'm like, in the application, we forgot to put that I went to Berkeley. She's like, okay, yeah, I'll take care of it, which meant like I'm not doing anything about it, I
Right.
think.
Right. Right.
Okay, so my son actually applied early admissions and he got deferred. And it was awful. I mean, it was really
But
just an,
was I mean, he
I
was
do.
deferred,
Yeah.
and then he was waitlisted too, right?
Yes. No, he was just deferred.
Just deferred. Oh,
And then he
okay.
got in the second round. So when that happens, I mean, that was just awful. I think everyone was just like, oh no, because you have this one chit that you can use for early
Right.
decision. And then
Right.
they said that the probability of getting in off of the early decision list was really low, like almost
Yeah.
lower than, much lower than you would expect.
It was a freaking miracle that he got in.
I really think it was a freaking miracle because I was like, how? So is it a miracle? I mean, what happens for people who are early decision and then they get in? I mean, it seemed like it would be a miracle, and it was a miracle, and he did get in. But what's happening? Do you know the background story of what's happening with schools when they have the early decisions and they defer you?
I think some of the people who are deferred because they're looking to fill a class, and they're not, rather than looking at individual applicants, they're thinking like, oh my God, we have an orchestra and we need an oboe player, or we have a whole soccer team, but we don't have a rugby team. So a lot of
Mm.
it is just that.
Oh,
The story I always tell is there was a kid who drove both of my boys in carpool, and he wanted to apply to Williams, which is the most difficult college to get into in the country, I think, even
wow.
harder than Stanford. Yeah,
Wow.
it's a fantastic liberal arts school. And he was working in theater, but he had this opportunity to work in theater tech, which meant moving chairs around, hanging lights, that kind of thing, doing sound checks. And his dad, who was a producer, we live in LA, so it
Hmm.
wasn't unusual, said like, great, he's schlepping stuff around, that's going to look good. And
Right.
in fact, he gave up a sport that he was playing because he loved this theater tech so much. Well, he ended up applying to Williams and got in early. And that year, they happened to build a new theater complex at Williams. And you can imagine the amount of actors and actresses that applied, but there probably weren't a lot of schleppers and
Wow, they
tech
needed
kid.
to have like a tech kid schlepping around stuff.
So, the
Oh
theory was
man.
that that helped him get in. So you just never know. So in your son's case, it could have been that early they just weren't, there were too many other kids like him
Right,
from Seattle with those kinds of interests and background.
right,
Or it could have been that that his admissions officer loved him, but they took a random vote. We don't know what goes on in there.
right.
And he was one short, so they put him in a maybe pile. We just don't really know.
Yeah,
But whatever it was, I think that they do defer people who have been recommended, but have a good like a legacy or some other kind of connection, a letter from the chairman of the board or something like that.
we didn't
Or
have
letter,
those things, but that would
I
have
mean,
been nice.
in my book we have like a letter from the Dalai Lama,
Right.
and which I don't advise getting. But so it could be that, or it could be kind of like we love this kid and we wish we could have admitted him, but there just wasn't enough room. So we're going to look at
Right.
him really um, carefully in the second round.
Yeah.
So I always tell kids it's a good thing to be. It's certainly a lot better than being rejected outright if they really love the school. Although
Right.
some people think like it's better to just break up and move on. You say, "Will you marry me?" It's better to get a no than a maybe.
Right. I think it's both. It can go both directions, right? Because if it was a no, they would have rejected you. So you're kind of like a maybe. And so that goes to waitlisting. There was a bunch of kids over the last couple, I think probably the prior month. I don't know when people hear about the whole waitlist thing. I assume it's is that usually April and May that,
It's usually, well, May 1st is the deadline for people to commit.
okay.
So the waitlist action probably starts a week or two after that.
Okay.
And usually and in the book, I have something about how you can find your waitlist donor. And true story, we were sitting in Santa Barbara and we overheard at the next table about a kid that had just gotten in off the wait list to Oberlin. And that day we heard of a friend of ours who actually decided not to go to Oberlin and chose Reed instead. And we thought, oh, well, that was our friend's child was the donor,
Oh,
gave
wow.
the gift of matriculation to.
You
So
know, it's so before we heard back from Duke, we'd heard back from Vanderbilt, and we were waitlisted, or he was waitlisted. It really feels like a we, isn't it, for parents
yeah,
when you go
but
through
you
this with
shouldn't
them?
say that. I'll
No.
forgive you,
Yes,
but
please forgive me.
all of your it's fun. What's happening is you're transitioning from the we of being a involved parent at home to having an adult, basically
Right.
now an adult kid
Yes.
who's making decisions on his own.
Exactly.
So
So he was
and it
waitlisted.
is we because you were paying too,
Right.
but let's use the singular
Yeah,
for
so
now.
he got waitlisted, and I talked to some girlfriends and were like, oh, if he really wants to go to that college, then what he needs to do is call them and say, I am really interested. I really want to go to this school. You need to like fly over to Vanderbilt in this case. Go fly over to Vanderbilt and like say, hey, I got off the wait list. I didn't have a chance to visit, but I want to visit and impress upon you how much I want to go to this school. And and I thought, wow, I would never have thought. Is that what you need to
Yeah.
do if you want to get off the wait list?
Well, that's common knowledge,
It is? I
and
guess I'm
that's
ignorant.
well, it's common knowledge within the neurotic parent circle. And to
Oh.
find these things out, you can look on the website College Confidential, which I call the scariest place on the internet. But there is a lot of accurate information that can be found very quickly. So the common knowledge is, and it won't work with a school like Berkeley or Michigan,
Right.
or Michigan. It might in terms of meeting someone in the department, but but a school like Vanderbilt, if you haven't visited and you are waitlisted, something called tough syndrome might come into play, which
Tough syndrome. Okay.
tough syndrome is when a school will turn a kid down who they think is using it as a safety.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the reason it's called that is because it was very prevalent at Tufts.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually not as prevalent there anymore. It's like more of a thing at Wash U now, and a few other, I think Northwestern, a lot of the Midwest schools. So, so if uh, if let's say at WashU, for example, WashU, I'm talking about Washington University
Yes,
in St. Louis, which has the worst name of any college. It's
it
a great
does.
college, but because people think it's like,
University of Washington.
yeah, exactly,
Mm-hmm.
or George Washington, or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
anyway. So they'll say like, wow, this super qualified kid wants to come here, but if we admit him or her, then they say no, if they're just using it as a safety, then our rankings are going to go down,
How
and
do
the
their
rank
rankings go down by saying no? You.
because their yield will go down. And
Uh,
and yield is very important in college rankings. The rankings are they almost seem like they're arbitrary. They're done by the one that people pay most attention to is U.S. News and World Reports, which
mm,
I say in the book was sort of a third-rate news magazine that was kind of weathering in the dentist's office, and then suddenly they started ranking schools. And wait a
yeah.
minute, why is Cornell number
Right.
14
Right.
and Brown number 19? Does that
Right.
make any sense?
Right.
And I don't know if those numbers are accurate, but
Yeah.
that thing has happened. So, so anyway, so WashU or Tufts or a school like that might say, we don't really want to go ahead and admit this student who is going to just say no anyway and ruin our yields, and then our ranking will go down.
So yield
So,
is the percentage of people that they give admission to and that accept. And so if they actually have, like, they give their, they're like, wow, this kid's amazing. Let's say yes at Wash U, and then they don't go, then their number looks bad. So the better to say you're waitlisted.
right, they'll say maybe, and then they wait for you to say, like, no matter what, I'm going to, it is absolutely my first choice. I will do anything to go there. And so one way to show that, of course, is to visit. But we do know someone that got into, I think it was Yale without visiting and off the wait list. So there are other ways. Like you don't have a lot of people simply,
Compromising photos. I think that must be it.
yeah.
Because how else? Compromising photos to admissions officer.
Well, a lot of people just can't afford to go
Right.
on.
Yeah. Who fly to New
So,
Haven of all places?
right. So instead, maybe you could send an email saying, unfortunately, I didn't get to visit, but I did go to an info session in my area, and I spoke to so and I researched such and such class, and this class has my name on it, and these are 3 clubs that I would join, and just show that you really know something about the school, and you're not just saying like, oh, I would love to go there,
Right.
even though I haven't visited. Now, if you live in the area, like let's say you live in LA and you want to go to Pomona, which
Mm-hmm.
is an hour away from here
Mm-hmm.
without traffic,
Right.
maybe 3 hours with traffic.
Oh
But
my gosh.
let's say you haven't visited Pomona and you're
Mm-hmm.
saying that's your first choice, then it's not going to look good.
Right.
So, but in terms of flying across the country, you will get a buy, and there are other ways to show interest.
Okay, that's really interesting, and I had no idea. I'm actually terrified to read College Confidential. I'd rather talk to you and have you tell me what we need to do if this were to happen to my second son.
Well,
But
I didn't know any of this. I mean, I started off just a
it's
mom on the
terrifying.
tour. I was on the tour with my son. I thought he was solid. He
Yeah.
had, really high GPA. He was a good kid. He was captain of the soccer team, sports editor of the school paper.
Right.
But on the tour, I found out that there were kids that had invented an antibiotic or discovered a galaxy or founded an orphanage. And he was not in that category.
I think that's the thing because I've said to my kids, I'm like, you got to do something that you just love doing, that's authentically you. And so Jida, my one who got into Duke, loved doing. He set up a video editing business, which is not like any other thing out there. It's not the speech and debate club and all these other things.
Right.
And my youngest one paints little miniatures. These little guys.
Oh, wow.
They're like
Okay,
this
well,
big. So I'm like, okay, well, those are your passions, and those are weird enough that there's no other kid that they will be looking at that paints
yeah.
miniatures. So I think
Well,
you're
he's on the
okay.
road. Right, right.
I think you're okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so All right, so this is a question. So I read someplace, I think it was in your blog, you were talking about extracurriculars because my kids, I've literally just said, do the thing you love doing. I'm not going to. If you talk to, they have these coaches that you spend, I don't know, like $15,000, $30,000 a year, and they focus
Right.
on cultivating your kids from eighth, and they want you to commit at eighth grade.
Right. That's
And
their ideal time. Yeah.
yeah, from eighth grade to 12th grade, they will cultivate your child's extracurricular activities. I don't know if they're even based on what the kids want. They just are based on what I think
What
looks
they
good.
think is going to get you in. Yeah. And at the time my older son was applying, there were I think one or two people like that, and now there's quite a few more. And the amount that they charge you goes up per, well, it'll go down overall, but it's going to be more per year the longer you wait. So they'll do something like they'll say, "Oh, you like to go to camp and be a counselor?" Like, forget that.
Right,
That's what everyone is doing.
right.
Maybe if you went to a drumming camp, possibly, or um, or something more specialized.
I just don't even know what, as a life coach, that just, that whole thing just like hurts my heart and just makes
Yeah,
me want to cry on the inside and outside. So so for our kids, I just said, just do what you love doing,
right,
and then we'll
right.
see. I mean, I'd rather you just explore your passions naturally and see where they lead you versus the whole idea of someone saying, I know you don't care about drumming, but if you want to get into Yale, you better start drumming your little heart away during
Right.
this next summer.
And
Oh no.
there are other aspects to your application besides the ones that you have a lot of control over.
Yeah.
Like my older son, we really couldn't figure out why he got into Duke
Mhm.
because he there were so many other people that were probably exactly the same as him.
Mhm.
And I think it might have had to do with this one letter that he got from his English teacher, and he wasn't even a good English student. He was a math STEM kid,
Mhm.
but he chose to ask this English teacher because he was his supervisor on the school paper, and they had traveled to New York to get a journalism award together.
Oh
And I
wow.
ran into the teacher much later, and he said that he remembered writing something that my son had more school spirit than he had ever seen
Oh.
before, that he drove down. I mentioned LA traffic already, I think how many times? Twice
Yeah.
in this. He had driven down to a girls' volleyball game in the South Bay during rush hour and got there, and there weren't that many people, and he got on the phone and talked all his friends into coming so that there would be
Oh.
enough people to root for
Oh
our
my
team.
gosh, that's a perfect letter.
And then he also said that he volunteered to room with him in New York instead of staying in a room with one of his best friends who he was traveling with. And
Wow.
so he just thought he was flexible and he had school spirit. And that's the kind of thing that I had no idea as a neurotic parent. He had no idea.
Right.
I knew the letter would be well written because this guy was an English teacher,
Right.
but I had no idea it was going to cover his character like that or his his school spirit. And so that might have been a tipping point. You just never
You just
know.
never know. I mean, that's the thing. Um, I we just don't know. I mean, what we did after he had gotten uh, deferred from early decision is we just had a rolling campaign of staying top of mind. So my son had naturally just done a video for our trip to Hawaii, and it was a really cool, well shot video. I'm like, send it over to the missions director. So he sent it over. And
Oh,
then
great.
he got an internship at a really great firm doing marketing and doing all of his talents. And so I'm like, go tell him that you had the internship. And then, like, we sent another letter of recommendation because I had a feeling that his Chinese teacher, who doesn't speak English well, which I didn't
Right.
even think about that, right? But
Yeah,
we
ask the English teacher. That's my hot tip for the day.
yes, no kidding. It's like, say, yeah, duh, I should have asked the English teacher, but we weren't
Yeah,
thinking about it.
right.
So, we did ask the English teacher to, and of course, like, I think those things, we just kept on rolling and like just
Hmm.
one after another, like, can you tell we're still interested? And then, so that's what we did. I don't know if that helped or hurt or,
I think it really does help. I think that if the stuff is organic, like it's not the time to take up a completely new extracurricular activity. But if you're enhancing something that you already have shown interest in, it's perfect. And also any time something new happens, it's an excuse to get in touch with
Right.
admissions
Right.
because they're really looking for reasons to admit you rather than to reject you.
Right. So they're trying
And
to
they
like give me stuff so I can go in and like get them
right,
convert the maybes to a yes.
right.
Ah, I see. So you're arming them with information. I didn't even get that. I get it now. Well,
Yeah, because they whoever your local person is has to sell you to a whole committee, and they
right.
usually have 30 seconds to do that. So they're going to say like, "Wow, we just got this awesome Hawaii video, and you know what? We're doing so many more videos now in our for basketball. This kid will be perfect for that."
Right.
And maybe we don't have that many videographers because
Right.
think about it, where are the videographers applying to NYU or
Right.
to USC?
Right.
So it could have been that could have helped, or also just the fact that he was relentless.
Right.
And
And just kept on. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so I was going to ask you about letter of recommendations. I get that now. The extracurricular. So my son started. He has this really a gift for speech and debate. He's really good at debating, and I hate it as a mom because I'll
yeah,
sometimes say something, and he's like, "Well, it's not logical because how can this be this and that's it's you're not logical, mom. Like these are the logical." And I'm like, nah! And so I said, honey, you really do have a gift for speech and debate. Why don't you try it out and see? So he did. Last year, he signed up for speech and debate. He'd taken speech and debate classes, but he signed up to join in the tournament. And the first one he's ever done. He got on into like the last. He was like the first or maybe third ranked of this whole statewide competition. And I thought, wow, that's great. And then he didn't do as well subsequent to that, but like that first,
that's
showing,
great.
yeah. So he had some early successes and he enjoyed it. Like more importantly, he has a gift and he enjoyed doing it. And I thought, well, it's junior year. I want him to do things he loves, and he's going to be so busy. So, should he take speech and debate and continue something that no one's going to give him credit for in school, but he will get credit for in life because he just loves doing speech and debate or could love it? I don't know. What are your thoughts as a neurotic parent?
Well, that's one of the top questions that people ask. The
Hmm.
first question is, should I take AP calculus and get a B, or should I take regular calculus and get an A? That's the top
Yes.
question people ask. But the second one is what you just said is like, should I not take advanced physics and stick with speech and debate, which I love, or should I take this AP physics class?
Right.
And um, and I think that it really there is no clear cut answer. Like assuming the rest of your curriculum is, or they call it the transcript, is very challenging and shows rigor, then the schools will respond to a kid following their passion.
Hmm.
But if it looks like he or she is just taking classes that come easily and not really challenging themselves, then it's not such a good idea. I mean, we know one girl that got into Cooper Union, which is one of the hardest schools to get into in the country, and it gives you tuition. It's tuition free,
Wow.
and it's either for engineering or for art. And she decided in junior year that she wanted to study art, but she had never really studied art before. She hadn't taken a lot of extracurricular classes, and the school went out of its way to let her take all art classes
Wow.
for senior year because she
Wow.
had fulfilled her other requirements. And I'm sure that helped her get into Cooper Union because now suddenly she had a portfolio.
Mm.
So, so I think and oh, by the way, she has a show. She's now 29, and she has a show at the Whitney in July.
Wow. Oh my
So
gosh. Oh my God. That's a fantastic
yeah,
story. That makes me
so
happy.
so in her case, it really paid off, following her passion and not just, she would have done, she is a very bright girl. She would have done great taking just straight academics. But what you're saying also just happened on another level to my younger son, where he really wanted to take, he was a foodie, he is a foodie still. And there was an English class offered called The History of Food or
Hmm.
Food and Food and Life, or it had a more interesting name,
Right.
and it included fleeting the planet, and it was reading about not just cookbooks, but it was
Right.
Um,
Real issues
so
related to food.
yeah, but it wasn't an honors class and it wasn't an AP class.
Mm-hmm.
And he had already been accepted to Great Books, which was equivalent to the AP class. And he said, well, should I take the class I really follow my passion, or should I take Great Books? And I said, well, what if you just read the Great Books on your own? I felt bad because he was so excited about this food class. And he still did get in. So he took the easier class, but it was one he was interested
Yes,
in.
you just don't know. Like, should you
Yeah.
take the more rigorous AP class and get a B plus, or the I don't know. So what? So the answer is so there are two questions. One is should you follow your dreams or not? And you said the first question, which we also had that question earlier in the year. So I'm glad that
Yeah.
you brought that up. Is so should you take the regular AP? Should you take regular physics and or take the AP physics? Go to regular physics and get an A, or get a B plus in AP physics.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask that question at one of the information sessions, they'll
Mm.
say you should get the A in AP Physics. So they basically won't give you the answer.
Right.
I think in the case of a B plus versus an A, then you should go with the B plus in
And
AP because they want to see you challenging yourself.
yeah, that's what I've heard.
But if it's a B minus, maybe not so much.
Yeah. Mm.
A lot of schools do reweight, they unweight your GPA. So if you have a 4.8 and you go to New Trier High School in Chicago, where they offer, 40 APs, and compared to Harvard Westlake School, which is a private school in Los Angeles, where they may only offer 11. And so the highest possible GPA is only a 4.3. This college is, if they want to compare those two kids, they're going to just have to unweight them anyway. And so what they do is they have the college counselor check a box. Did they take the most rigorous classes or rate the rigor?
Okay. So like the way that as I understand it, the weighting works. So if you got a B plus, it's kind of equivalent to an A minus in
Right.
in converted speak. So
Yeah.
they would look at the A minus number, not the necessarily the B plus number for
No,
colleges.
they would look at the B plus, but then in the regular physics, they would, well, oh, okay, yeah. A weighted curriculum means that they will look at the A minus,
Okay.
but in an unweighted curriculum, they would look at the B plus, but then they'd look at this other box that says this kid
Uh
took the most rigorous curriculum.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it. Okay, so that's really so. What other questions are other people asking that I haven't asked? You said those are the two most popular questions. What are some of the other ones?
Well, I think, are you talking about how to get in, or just like how to go about your? I
Oh,
mean, right now people care most about money.
that's
That's
the biggest thing,
yeah.
right?
I mean, of course, not across the board. There are always going to be families that have put away enough, or they've inherited enough, or they're just very wealthy.
Right.
But it used to be that college was something parents definitely provided for, and now that's not so much not a given. And there's this whole among the middle class, it's almost more prestigious. When I say middle class, I mean a middle income family, like probably earning with two wage earners like 120 grand or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Among them, what they most care about is a merit scholarship
Mm.
or some kind of state incentive to go. Like in Texas, the top 10% of the achievers in the state automatically get into one of the UT schools.
Wow.
And there's 4 or 5 other states like that. And there's some states that will take out of state students if they have those stats.
Wow.
So I'd say right now that's what in this community where I live, a lot of people still can afford the really high bill. So when I do events around here and in Northern California, I don't hear the question as much, or in Greenwich, Connecticut or something,
Right.
but everywhere else, people want to know like which schools give a free ride and how does, or at least free tuition, and how does my son or daughter get that? And
Yeah.
they also want to know how to game the FAFSA, which is the
Financial aid.
scholarship
Yeah.
form, right? The financial form that you fill out.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And we're going to have a separate section on that because I think that those are really important things because the return on investment nowadays is not very clear. Like, you're
It's
going
not.
to, yeah, I mean, I think it is clear. You're not going to get, I mean, the return on investment is not good for college. I mean, you do it, I don't know. I can't, I don't even, I could
Well,
go in and,
it depends. I think it's not good compared to if you were able to get the same kind of job without going to college.
right.
Like if
That's
you could,
true. Yeah, but
you
you
could
can't.
suddenly become a financial advisor at Goldman Sachs with no, obviously you would make in those 4 years, you would make $500,000,
Right.
and but you wouldn't be able to get that job. Although they're the Peter Thiels of the world, in the tech industry, there are kids that are invited when they're, in seniors in high school to just skip college altogether.
Right. Well,
Uh,
I don't know. To me, it seems like the best route for that is do community college, which is way cheaper. Get college credit. So by the time you go to University of Washington, that accepts a lot of the community college stuff, you're just paying a lot less money for your
right.
overall college experience. I don't
Yeah,
know. That to me seems the
that's
way to go.
one really obvious way to go. I don't know if I and around here it's the same where you have Santa Monica College where you're basically guaranteed to get into one of the UCs,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
However, I don't know the one missing part of the equation is who you're going to meet in those schools, and
that's a
if
good
you're
point.
an emotionally gifted person, it doesn't really matter at all.
Yeah,
We all know in the work environment there are people who went to Ivies that are sitting right next to people who went to state schools or who went to unknown. They
right,
call directional schools like
right,
Western Kentucky
right,
or
right,
Northern Florida, that kind of.
right,
But the question is, are you going to meet like if you go to Yale, your classmates are going to be ambassadors and politicians, and they're going to have startups, and they're going to be funding startups,
mm,
and so there's always some kind of reason to choose an elite school.
mm-hmm,
Is the education that much better? That really depends. I mean, I think for certain majors, probably it is.
right.
For others, I mean, for something like someone the other day was telling me Penn State was better than Penn for engineering. And I don't know if that's true because I don't know. I
Right,
haven't looked at the engineering departments, but it's very possible that it
right,
is.
right. Okay, so what's new in terms of ACT versus SAT? What's going on with that ACT writing section? That was just mysterious and this year.
The whole thing is crazy. It's crazy
Yeah,
because what happened was SAT was the coastal test, and ACT was kind of the poor Midwestern
right,
cousin,
right,
who everyone thought didn't have as much clout.
right.
But then once the schools started, the colleges, all of them started accepting either or. People realized that the ACT was a much more fact based, wasn't trying it was just kinder and gentler. It wasn't
Mm-hmm,
trying to trick you. You were allowed to guess. On the SAT, you were getting penalized for guessing.
right.
And there were just a lot of advantages, and it was just more straightforward.
Right.
So certain kids who didn't do well on the SAT started taking the ACT. Oh, also, you didn't have to send in everyone,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the ACT required that you did. So
You
a
mean
lot
the
of kids,
SAT required you did?
yeah,
Or
the SAT,
okay, got it.
yes.
Okay, got
So a
it.
lot of kids bailed. Kids on the coasts
Uh,
bailed. They took the ACTs. My older son took SAT, and then in that 3 year period, my younger son ended up taking ACT. So, but then SAT saw a big drop in people who were signing up, and they flipped out literally, and they made the new SAT just like the old ACT, the new SAT like the old ACT,
right.
and now and then the ACT stopped. Did they stop the writing this year or was it last year?
No, writing they had last year. They had writing. Yeah, they had writing. Well, I don't know because my son did
He
uh,
did the writing.
he did the writing
Yeah, I
and
think they still have. Anyway, I guess what happened was people swung back to the SAT because there was a rumor that it was easier now because they were trying to get to
oh,
to re-entice everyone.
Mm.
In fact, it's interesting because a friend of mine who just the one who keeps texting while we're talking, her son is a senior. He's going to, or he just graduated. He's going to University of Chicago, and she was, which is very competitive and very tough to get into, and she asked me what I thought, and I said he should take a practice test of both. That's what I always tell everyone because they're very different exams. And she said that he took the SAT first and did really well and liked it, and that was that. So I think the new, and even though there was a rumor that it was going to be hard to do well on the new SAT because there wasn't a backlog of practice tests and that kind of thing, there's a lot of free online assistance, and now people have moved back to that.
Oh, interesting. So it's easier? The SAT is easier?
That's the rumor. Again, you could look on College Confidential. There's a lot of discussion
Okay,
about.
well, that's interesting. Okay, and what's the story with the ACT writing? Because it,
Also, it really depends on the student too.
hmm
Like my older son didn't mind all the analytical stuff on the SAT, whereas my younger son was just in a rush to get done and he wanted something more straightforward.
Okay, got it. Okay. It seems like if you're just willing to learn the content, ACT is better. So is SAT supposed to be like more strategy and tricking you, or what are they doing?
It was originally they at 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 it for it was a weed out test actually to keep the Ivies elite. That was how it was started,
Oh.
and because it wasn't required everywhere.
Hmm.
But now the whole testing thing is kind of backfired anyway. Everyone realizes you're never really going to take a test like that again. A lot of smart kids, very high GPAs, don't just are not good test takers because they haven't been taking them the whole time. And in certain states, kids are taught to the test and they take standardized tests 24/7. In other states, it's not like that.
Wow.
Haven't even, and also some kids are paying a fortune for tutors, like some of them as much as six or seven, $800 an hour or
Oh
a,
my gosh.
a session. So
Wow.
um, anyway, so if your child is, my advice here is if your child's not a great test taker, there's a website called fairtest.org
Hmm.
of including some really great schools that they just don't require standardized tests, or they might allow you to take different tests,
Hmm.
like subject tests rather than the SATs or
Yeah.
the ACTs.
And that's crazy. The whole like Georgetown, they require you to take three subject
Yeah.
matter tests, which I think is just an unreasonable thing to ask a
Well,
person to do.
that was a deal breaker for both of my kids. They actually looked at Georgetown and liked it. I think that might be one reason why they stick with it is they don't care about having that many people apply. They would rather be selective among the ones who do apply.
Right.
So that's just a way to get kids that are more serious.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
kids who take APs usually do well in those subject tests.
Thank you so much. This was fantastic. You are just
Well,
a wealth of information. I can't believe
thank
you do
you.
this part time. You just know so much.
Well, I love doing it, and if anyone wants to contact me, send me an email. I think it's the neurotic parent at Gmail.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
happy to
That's
answer
great.
questions.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then you're JDRothman.com and then also the neuroticparent.com.
yeah, right. You can go through jdrothman.com for sure if the Gmail doesn't work.
Right. And then the neurotic parent is a
Yeah,
parent, neurotic, the
parent. Yeah, it's
neuroticparent.com.
just one. Right.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.